to roll for episode number 31 of the Shutdown Inning podcast. I am Steven Rissotto, alongside, as always, Tylor Hall. Tyler, what's going on? How have you been?
Hey, everybody. I'm doing pretty good. We're in the stretch run now. It's September baseball. A lot of fun races happening and some fun baseball to watch if you're not in the Bay Area. So, it's been a lot of fun. How about you? How are you doing? How's senior year of college going, my friend?
Senior year of college is going good. 2 semesters left at San Francisco State. It has been busy, but there's been times where I've been, day baseball is the hardest because now there's stuff going on during the day at school. So I kind of have to like sneak in checks every now and then at the MLB at Bat app. And if the Giants are playing during the day, which the the Wrigley series was very much a struggle to try and get baseball in, but got a few innings of Giants baseball in at school, so that's always
Nice.
fun. Some other people in the newsroom are interested, so always a good time. But no, everything's been going good, and definitely playoff pictures starting to transpire a little bit. We could get into that in just a little bit. But I figured we'd touch on some of the news that is kind of happening around the game that we missed. A lot of prospects being called up, Tyler. We've mentioned a good number on this podcast before, but Jasson Dominguez is a name that we've heard for quite a long time, and Jasson Dominguez is the New York Yankees prospect, and if any team's looking for a boost, it's going to be the New York Yankees, especially offensively. 20 years old. He's a center fielder, got called up, and he's hitting really well through about 20 at-bats. But just overall, I mean, the Yankees kind of a disappointing season. Nice to kind of have someone there to finish off the year strong, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I remember spring training, he was crushing it. And I was kind of like, oh, wow, I wonder when they'll call this kid up. And I'm surprised, especially with how their season's gone, that they've waited until early September to do it. But, worst, I don't know if it'll be too little too late. Probably, I think the Yankees are 7 or 8 games out of the third wild card right now. But at least if you're a fan in the Bronx right now, you have to be excited to see this guy getting some reps and performing and not coming up and struggling. He's pulled up his stats here, 3 home runs in just a handful of games. So he's showing that he belongs and can be probably a staple for their lineup for who knows how many years to come.
Yeah, definitely. And first home run came off Justin Verlander, an opposite field homer at the bandbox that we call Minute Maid Park.
Yeah.
Which we've seen some cheap homers there over the years.
Yeah, I remember seeing a tweet from one of the Yankees fan X accounts, and he was saying like, oh, I can't believe they're letting him start his career against Verlander. What a tough assignment. And then I think it was the first pitch he saw in the major leagues. It wasn't even his first home run. It was the first pitch he saw in the big leagues from a 3-time Cy Young Award winner. Gone. That's a good way to say that you're here. So I'm excited to see him kind of develop and see what he does for the Yankees, because I think I've mentioned it before. A lot of people kind of hate the Yankees. I don't mind the Yankees. A lot of it goes back to like the late 90s, early 2000s when they were the only team spending money. And I was like, well, shoot, if my team could spend money like that, I'd want them to do it. And a lot of people, I think, outside of the Yankees-Red Sox rivalry kind of gravitate to the Red Sox just because they're not the Yankees, and I'm kind of the opposite. So I'm interested to see what he does for the Pinstripes.
Yeah, no, definitely me too. And speaking of home runs at Minute Maid Park, I don't think we wrote this down, but did you see the run that Jose Altuve went on? He had four homers in a row, I think.
Yeah, he had like 3 homers in one game by the second inning. I think he had like 3 home runs before the 7, 8, 9 hitters for the other team even had an at bat.
Yeah, that's insane. He's a guy that I want to see, and I know the whole Houston cheating thing, but I've always liked Jose Altuve. I always liked kind of the way he's played and his brand of baseball. So good to see him getting it going too, but had to throw that out there because Minute Maid Park made me think of it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm forgetting who. I'm blanking it. I think it might have been Judge put one like over the train in left center. It like bounced off the train in left center. So I mean, it flies down there in Houston, and so
the most iconic home run at that ballpark.
Pujols out of the stadium in the World Series.
Yeah, one. That one's replayed all the time. Yeah, maybe we should do like rankings.
Yeah,
of, like,
it's not like the ball has any
ballpark.
Yeah, it's not like there's any trouble putting them out there. But then they have the Crawford boxes, which are about 20 feet from home plate down the left field line that helps some balls get out too. So
Cal's Hill.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's cool to see those little. That's part of the reason why I love baseball so much. The field isn't uniform everywhere. The infield is, but every part can kind of have its own little, niche things that make it unique. And Houston definitely has a few of those.
Yeah, definitely. So congrats to Jasson Dominguez on getting called up. This seems like prospects are getting called up everywhere. I mean, I think the Cubs had a guy debut the other day. The Red Sox had a guy debut the other day. The Diamondbacks just called someone up. The Orioles have guys coming up. So really cool to see these guys kind of come up.
Speaking of the Orioles calling guys up, it was to AAA, but did you hear Jackson Holiday had trouble getting a hotel room when he got promoted to AAA because they thought he was a kid trying to check into his own hotel room?
I did see that. Yeah, and Jackson Holiday, another guy who's kind of flying through the system, who does look very young.
Yeah.
So, and I'm shocked that I didn't have that problem of struggling to get a hotel room when we went to go see the Bananas. But um,
They
yeah,
should have you should have had trouble because you're leaving valuables behind at the front desk. But yeah, I mean, and he's the number one prospect in baseball. He's flying up, and it's not like the Orioles. He's like the one of the only guys for the Orioles. They're stacked. They've called up a few guys this season already. Westberg, and they have a couple other guys that are highly ranked prospects. So gotta love being an Orioles fan right now because they're one of the top teams in baseball, and they also have a farm full of kids that are going to be up very soon in the next year or two, probably.
yeah, they're absolutely loaded with Rutschman and Mountcastle, and even throw in Gunnar Henderson in there, who's hit really well in the second half. They have some good pieces down there in Baltimore. And Jackson Holiday's coming up soon. Speaking of kind of that region of the United States, if you take a train a little down the way, you'll end up in Washington, D.C., where the Nationals are kind of having a surprisingly decent year compared to kind of what we thought. But one, really sad that we mentioned this on the last episode. But Steven Strasburg is unfortunately forced to hang up his spikes. Actually, we don't know the details. I don't know if forced is the right word, but he's hanging up the cleats. We're just going to assume that the injuries that he's had has played a huge part in it, which I'm sure they have. But just kind of to expand on this, the Nationals were having trouble trying to get his contract situation figured out. They were going to retire his number. And I know Tyler and I disagree about this because I said that I don't believe I'm very tough on jersey retirements. But like the first time I saw this, I was like, God, Steven Strasburg, jersey retirement? Really? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it varies from franchise to franchise. I know that's typically been the Giants' MO, and I think for just how long they've been a franchise, it makes a lot of sense. And I've kind of broken from that in recent years with Bonds, who I think was kind of a special, you should be in the Hall of Fame, so we're going to hang up your jersey. And then Will Clark last year, or was it earlier this year? It was all delayed because of the the pandemic. But for a lot of these franchises that necessarily haven't been around as long, I mean, you don't need to have a parallel between the Hall of Fame and a jersey retirement. You kind of have to look at the scope of work and what they mean to that franchise. He was one of the biggest prospects in baseball when he came up and got drafted. He led them to their only World Series in franchise history, and had a really solid career when he was able to be on the mound. So they still have 98 other numbers they can hand out. And so, I mean, and you could argue he basically gave up his pitching arm to win that World Series for them. So, put his number up there. Let people talk about him every time they come to the ballpark.
And I like to consider myself a legitimate, as do you, baseball. I didn't even know his number was 37. And I do understand that he meant a lot to the franchise, and I do understand the World Series accomplishments that he had, and that basically got him paid. But at the same time, like I don't buy the prospect argument when it comes to the jersey retirement. There's a lot of guys that were big prospects and who were highly hyped prospects, and Strasburg is of that top tier.
And led them to their only World Series in franchise history.
Yeah, yes, led them to their only World Series in franchise history. And Strasburg, like I said, top prospect, right? But there's a lot of guys that are very hype prospects that don't deserve to get their jersey retired just because they're hype prospects. And I'm not saying obviously the World Series stuff, But here's one thing that I had with it. Like he did mean so much to the franchise, but I think it's only because of the World Series stuff. He was only an All-Star 3 times in an era where pitchers still, had that 200 inning threshold as kind of a legitimate indicator on success. He reached it twice, and that was it, twice. He battled through injuries, and again, not his fault. But at the same time, you have to have some sort of length of success in your career that is sustainable for like a long period of time and consistency, right? And I just feel like Strasburg was not the great pitcher. Again, one of the better first overall starting pitchers in history, if you look at the track record of guys that were picked first in the draft. But still, I don't think I'm very tough on it. I think if you're going to have your jersey retired, I think you have to be near Hall of Fame level. And I just don't see Strasburg as being close to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that argument. I think that's also kind of why, just kind of draw it back to what the Giants do. That's why they have the Wall of Fame, so that
Yeah.
you can still recognize the people that contributed in a decent manner to your franchise without having to hang up the jersey. Would you feel better if they retired 31 for Strasburg instead of 37 to show how many innings he threw after he signed his massive extension?
Wow. Okay, I didn't go that far. I didn't go that far. Yes. No. I don't know. I don't know if I would. Is Tim Raines' number retired there? Like I'm gonna pull up right now the list of Nationals retired numbers. Um, because I feel like, you know, there's got to be Tim Raines there. He played on the
Tim
Expos. I don't know
Tim
how much.
Raines, Gary Carter, Hall of Famer, Andre
All Hall of
Dawson, Hall
Famers.
of Famer,
Yep.
Tim Raines, Hall of Famer, Jackie Robinson, of course, as is everywhere, and Rusty Staub. I don't believe Rusty Staub is a Hall of Famer. I could be wrong. I'm not a big Rusty Staub encyclopedia
Yeah,
over
well,
here.
Rusty Staub, I'm looking at it right now. It played what, 3 years with the organization, 4 years with the organization, and was a 3 time All-Star for three of them. But 4 years with the organization, and we're retiring his number. Like, isn't there? Am I this crazy to think? And again, no World Series for Rusty Staub.
Well, if
Strasburg
you
has
go
that.
back to if you look at Rusty Staub compared to the others, I mean, he played a decade and a half before any of the other guys even played. So at the time that they retired his number, he was probably like the best player in franchise history, even if it was for a short window. By the time he hung them up, so
Yeah, I mean, I'm just tough on it. Like, I mean, there's some like Barry Bonds not in the Hall of Fame, but undoubtedly deserves his number to be retired in San Francisco. Um, yeah, but you look at the Yankees and they have, Ron Guidry's number retired, and guys that just, there's a lot of examples that you could go to in New York, but I feel like the Mets are kind of taking part in that. The Mets are retiring Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden's number coming up here. And again, both those guys are like Mets Hall of Famers, Mets icon, but jersey retirement to me is just such a big deal. And I feel like it might be getting devalued just a little bit. But
yeah, I think part of it too for me is like I don't know Mets jersey numbers enough to know if anyone's ever worn the same number that Gooden or Strawberry ever wore.
mhm.
I mean, if you keep it out of circulation and then you decide down the line to retire it, it kind of makes more sense. It was kind of like I love Will Clark, first favorite player of my lifetime. But I mean, they tossed around 22 like it was a bag of sunflower seeds for a long
Mhm.
time. And then they decided to retire it. So it's kind of weird that you like give some guys that honor after dozens of guys have worn it since they played. Um, but hey, neither of us are going to lose sleep over Strasburg getting his number retired.
No, I
But
will.
it leads to a good debate. I know you're going to be sitting out there 37. How dare they? Um,
Good for
but
him. Yeah, good for him. I'm not, yeah, again, not going to lose sleep over it, but I think we overdo it sometimes with the jersey retirements. And I feel like one World Series from a franchise, again, NLCS MVP, World Series MVP, I understand, but I know the Nationals are still kind of finding their way as an organization. I'd still consider them in the early stages of being in Washington, despite being there, what, 18, 20 years,
yeah,
almost. Um, but still, I mean, You have to have a higher standards.
I bet you that's part of it too. All their retired players right now, retired numbers were from the Montreal days, so they probably want to get some Washington flavor in there, so that the fans that are going to their games now feel like, hey, we saw that guy.
Yeah, and like Ryan Zimmerman, what about him? You know, what about why aren't they retiring number 11 for Ryan Zimmerman? Why is Strasburg ahead of Zimmerman? Zimmerman's like Mr. Nationals, probably played the most games there in franchise history. He's got to. I feel like, you know, and again, I don't know if it's a contest or not, but just another one that is probably going to come up at some point.
Justice for Ryan Zimmerman here on the shutdown inning.
And I don't even think he should get his jersey retired, but I'm just throwing it out there because I think he's a better candidate than Strasburg.
Yeah. But yeah, to kind of transition to another retirement of sorts, iconic manager Terry Francona has announced that he's retiring after this year. He's had some health issues, and he just said his mind and his body are telling him it's time. So this will be his last season as he wraps up with the Cleveland Guardians. But I mean, 2 World Series championships, 3 pennants, 3-time manager of the year. He helped break the curse in Boston and then threw a second one on there to boot. So, I figure it's worth tipping the cap to Tito.
Yeah, and Terry Francona is in a position in Cleveland where he could have basically managed until he retired, and it's looking like he is close to making the decision. I know some people make comments and without actually thinking it through, but it sounds like this is pretty well thought through for Terry Francona, and he's not just saying it. I think he might actually follow through with it. But it's very nice of him to give the organization kind of a heads up in that regard. Because, again, like I said, he could have managed there for a while as long as he wanted to, and he's had the health stuff in recent years. And you're going to agree with me on this, I think, but Hall of Famer, 100% Hall of Famer, one of the best managers of the 21st century, one of the best managers of the modern game in terms of what we hear from players, being a player's manager. He was instrumental in breaking the curse in 2004. He broke the Red Sox curse. He almost, broke what was then the Cleveland Indians curse. And now with the Guardians finishing it off, and he's had some good young teams recently, but also a good player, by the way, during his career, playing career. But really hats off to Terry Francona, who just legendary figure in the game, and he was only with a few cities, only with Philly, Boston, Cleveland, so didn't really travel around too much, but kind of cemented himself with those organizations.
Yeah, he's at 1,941 wins, so he's going to end up just short of 2,000. 2 World Series rings. So yeah, he's definitely going to be a Hall of Famer. Everyone else with 2,000 wins or more is in, except for Dusty Baker and Bruce Bochy, because they're still after it. So yeah, definitely Hall of Famer, and I can't wait for the Red Sox to retire number 47 in his honor, Stephen.
Yeah, exactly. And also the longest tenured manager entering this season with one team. So Terry Francona has been with Cleveland since 2013. So 2013, longest tenured manager, and that shows a lot to who he is and what people think of him, that Cleveland is willing to keep him around for that long. So shout out comes from a baseball family. His dad, Tito Francona, was a former player himself who played in the 1950s and 60s. So baseball's in his blood.
Yeah. Yeah. So heck of a career. I'm actually, for the next item, Stephen, I'm going to kick that down a little bit. But I think, last week we talked about our dream infield.
Yep.
And we talked about maybe expanding that and just kind of let's keep building our favorite teams. And so I think, we can talk dream outfield. So again, just for our listeners, because I'm sure you've been waiting for this segment, we're talking players that Steven and I have seen in our lifetime with our own eyeballs, and maybe not necessarily the best players we've ever seen in those positions, but like our favorites. And they also usually tend to be pretty dang good ball players. So Steven, you want to hit us with your dream outfield from the Rizzo era?
Yes, from the Rizzo era. I'm just going to say preemptively that I'm very jealous of yours, but here's mine, which is pretty decent too. Obviously a slam dunk, first outfielder. I'm going to put him in center field. I'm going to go with Mike Trout. Mike Trout is the best baseball player of his generation. He had a prime like no other. He had a peak like no other. We've talked about kind of what his career might end up looking like. And, there still would be the what if factor a little bit with Mike Trout, kind of like there was with Mickey Mantle. But still, his peak was amazing. He's the best player aside from Shohei Ohtani. Again, very different. We're not comparing Shohei Ohtani to anybody, but the best non Shohei Ohtani player out there that I have seen. The multiple MVP awards, the very high WAR seasons. If he retired like 5 years ago, he still would have been a Hall of Famer. And he's only 32 years old. There's a lot of baseball left in Mike Trout, I think. And I hope we get to see him in the postseason coming up soon. But he's a legend. I got a poster up here hanging up above me. I got literally right here a Mike Trout cup from when I went to see the Halos in 2000, maybe 17 or whatever it was. I got an autographed Mike Trout baseball card, big Mike Trout guy. Jersey of Mike Trout. He's one of the few jerseys that I have. Legend of the game. So he's my center fielder. I'll put Bryce Harper in right field. Bryce Harper, another one. We talked about Strasburg being a hype prospect. Bryce Harper had that since he was 15, 16 years old. And there's a point in high school where he was not being thrown to. So he had to go ahead and take it into his own hands and go to community college at a very young age. On the cover of Sports Illustrated, hitting balls at a Tropicana field at like 17 years old, making the big leagues at 19 years old with the Nationals. And there's questions about, what kind of personality he would have on the field, but he's evolved really nicely into a guy who just gets it done. He's the face of every franchise he's walked into, and I think loyalty applies to him too. He didn't necessarily sign a long-term deal in Washington, but he's committed to Philadelphia. I really believe that, and I think the Philly fans have, he's embraced them. They've embraced him. Side note, quickly, there's talk of him possibly moving to first base. He's willing to it, according to some of the National Baseball writers, which is really interesting. But Bryce is definitely on the Cooperstown track, I think, for sure. He's only 30 years old. So we've only had Bryce Harper for 12 years. It feels like he's been around forever. So he's my right fielder. My left fielder, I'll put Andrew McCutchen in left field. It was narrowing it down between McCutchen and Betts. That was the hardest part of this whole exercise. But I'm going to take McCutchen because I really enjoyed him kind of in my early years of watching baseball. Again, Harper and McCutchen are both other guys like Trout, whose jersey I have. And McCutchen, an MVP, a fun personality, an all-star, Silver Slugger, Gold Glove. Still playing. Unfortunately, he's going to be out for the year with Pittsburgh with a partially torn Achilles, so we wish him well on that. I believe he's torn his ACL once, now his Achilles, which is unfortunate. And I hope we haven't seen the last of Andrew McCutchen. He's 36 years old, but a really good career, really fun, one of the best outfielders of his generation too. And just a Pittsburgh Pirate when I think about him. He's been on other teams. He's been with Philly, the Yankees, the Giants, the Brewers, but I always think of him with the dreadlocks in Pittsburgh and breaking that postseason streak, or the postseason drought in Pittsburgh in 2013 with that team. I love the 2013 Pirates team, by the way, 94 and 68. And that was a fun team full of a lot of exciting guys led by McCutchen. But yeah, that's my outfield. I'm very jealous of yours, but what do you think about mine?
Yeah, I mean, I love all those guys. I don't think there's a bad pick there. I mean, we're talking about all-time greats either way. But, a little note I thought of on each one, Trout, like you mentioned, right now he's kind of a case of the what ifs. We're thinking we might have seen the last of him in center field. So maybe that will help him stay healthier. Like you mentioned, he's only 32. He just turned 32. So, he could still have, 3, 4, 5 more productive years if he can stay healthy. So hopefully we get that. He could easily reach 100 WAR if he can stay healthy. Harper, I think the move to first is kind of the same thing. Moving to first could probably keep him fresh and healthier for the long term, because like you said, he is committed to Philadelphia. When he signed there, he made sure that there was a no trade clause. He was like, I'm committing to you for like 12 or 13 years. I want you to commit to me for 12 or 13 years. So I want to make sure I am a Philly for that long. So, and then McCutchen, I just hope, he's such a fun guy. We've talked about it before, how just great he is, and he's great for the game. He's having fun out there. His social media is a must follow if you're not following already. And I just hope that, and I don't see him wanting to go out with an injury. And he was playing pretty well this year when he was on the field. So hopefully he can rehab that Achilles, and we get to see Kutch for at least one more year,
Yeah.
probably in Pittsburgh where it should be.
And last thing, real quick on Harper, and you mentioned kind of the no trade clause. Like obviously, a player's number one goal is to win a championship, but I do, in a weird way, appreciate guys that are kind of aware of their own legacy and what their legacy means to baseball. And for a guy to be a one team guy is so important. But limiting that, like if it doesn't work out, to a two-team guy, that's also important. And I feel like there's, a lot of great two-team guys in baseball history. And, Harper signing that long-term deal, like he's going to be a part of those big Philly events when he retires, like the reunions and the Wall of Fame events and the Hall of Fame events. And just to have an impact on an organization like a lot of players often do with a team for a very long time, I feel is really important. And he knows that his legacy is growing, and staying with a small amount of teams, I think, could do that for a player. So
Yeah.
kudos to him for wanting to stay in Philly. Really cool.
Making sure you're not an answer on the immaculate grid for as
Yeah.
many squares as possible. I mean, that's something that doing the just kind of little spin off on the immaculate grid. It's kind of like, I like to, when I'm done, kind of look at the other potential answers, because I'll list them all out now. And it's nuts to see like how many guys pop up on like so many
Mhm.
squares because they have to hop around at the end of their career. And I get it, keeping your career going, but I do think it's nice to see, those guys that can limit uh, you know, their home
Yeah.
address to as few places as possible.
You want to be the high percentage guy. Like everybody dreams of being the high percentage guy in immaculate grid. No knock on the low percentage guys. Making it to the big leagues is a big accomplishment. They're fun to pick from in the immaculate grid. And oftentimes they're really good players, but there's something about the high percentage guys that if you're in that category, you're a different specimen.
Yeah. Speaking of, I just got to say, I was stoked. The other day, I had a score of 4 on the immaculate grid. I don't think I'm ever beating that. So I was stoked to fill that out. I don't know if I sent you that. I'll send you my grid. I got 4%.
Yes. So I did one today and I got screwed. I was going to get something definitely under 15, probably like 12, 13 or whatever. And Mike Musina for the Orioles 200 strikeouts
he was like 70, right?
77%, and it screwed it screwed everything up. I was like Jim Palmer or Mike Musina. Let's do Mike Musina. And I
Should have
almost
gone Eric Bedard, man.
I didn't even post it. I was so embarrassed. So screw everything. Eric Bedard, was he one of them?
Yeah, he was my pick. I'll let you know what my score was on him.
Yeah, I remember Eric Bedard, lefty with Tampa Bay in his later years. He had the Ted Lilly kind of twist when he was pitching.
Yeah, he would have gotten you an 11%. You would have still come in around 20.
I would have been fine with that, but my score ended up being like 80 something. It was bad. I couldn't believe it. That was the highest percentage. Well, there's been some 90s sometimes that I've seen, like when I play really early in the morning, when people still haven't played yet. But 77%. It was like a reasonable time too. It was like 10 a.m. Like what the
Yeah. Well, one thing I do, if you play early in the morning, just go back and check in the evening because your score will change as more people play. So maybe you don't have a low as a score on some guys. Once more people have played, that number might go down. So check to see what your score is later in the day.
I'm not checking that one.
It might go down a bit. Yeah, I think you're screwed on Messina, buddy.
Anyways, I know in your outfield though you have some high immaculate grid percentage guys. Let's hear them.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got a pretty low travel rate here. But left fielder, if you know me, you know it's going to be Barry Lamar Bonds. Talked about him at length on most episodes. I feel like he comes up at least once. So here's our Bonds mention of the day: home run king, 5 tools, could do it all. Giants legend, 756, actually 762. But so he's my left fielder, of course. Center field, I'm going Griffey. He was one of my favorite non-Giants growing up. It was him and Cal Ripken. I guess he's the comp to Trout on mine. The what could have been. Got the backwards hat, made it iconic. And just wish he could have stayed healthy because he already is an all-time great, but he could have been even greater, which is ridiculous to think about. And then in right field, I'm going Tony Gwynn, the one of the greatest pure hitters of all time, best in probably the last 50 or 60 years. You probably have to go back to Ted Williams to find someone who is as pure of a hitter as Tony Gwynn. One franchise, Bonds two franchises, but Tony Gwynn, Mr. Padre. And I mentioned last week when we talked about Strasburg, Strasburg was like one of the last ties to Tony Gwynn in Major League Baseball because Tony Gwynn managed him at San Diego State. Just an all around awesome guy, awesome baseball persona. And he was like the first baseball death that really like shook me because I grew up watching him and he died so young. So I'm going Bonds, Griffey, Gwynn. That's a solid core of a lineup right there in the outfield.
Yeah, really. I knew Bonds would be up there. Obviously, there's no bigger Barry Bonds fan than Tyler Hall. And yeah, Griffey, I think everybody in that era would agree. Everybody in your era would agree that Griffey kind of transcended the game. And Ricky Henderson had a lot to do with that too. But Griffey with the backwards hat and the style and the flair that he played with. And another what if guy like Mike Trout, another what if guy. Like he didn't really have the injury. He had a big injury history once he got to Cincinnati in 2000, and I think about those Mariner teams a lot, and I saw my timeline a cover of a 2001 Sports Illustrated edition with Ichiro, Brett Boone, Edgar Martinez, and Mike Cameron. And I was like, God, the year like a few years before they could have added Randy Johnson, A-Rod, and Griffey on that cover. They would have been. They didn't have any of those three guys on the 2001 team that won 116 games. That's insane.
Yeah, and even Griffey, he didn't bounce around too much. He had a little stop in Chicago with the White Sox that most people probably forget about. Think of that on the grid, guys.
The grid, yeah.
But 13 years in Seattle, 9 in Cincinnati. It was kind of cool. He kind of did the McCutcheon and came back and retired in Seattle after played a couple years back home in the Pacific Northwest. So
yeah, Manny Ramirez also stopped in Chicago. That seems to be a stop for people.
Yeah, he was one that I considered as well because he's probably one of the most pure right-handed hitters of all time. People think of the power, but he hit for average too. He was a solid hitter. But yeah, I just like Griffey, like you said, he had that swagger, he had the style, and it just looked like he was having fun out there. And he just didn't know how to not play as hard as he could. He started getting injured a few times in Seattle because he would just like crash into the center field wall going after catches where, he just couldn't say, well, I don't want to run into the wall here because it might put me out for a few weeks or a couple months. I want to make this catch. And if he could have had that like little regulator in his mind to kind of think that through, he could have done even more than 630 home runs, which I get probably puts him at what, 6th now. But would that be 6th? Probably.
Yeah, probably would have definitely gone above A-Rod, who had 696. I believe Tommy is in the low 600s. Sosa is in the low 600s too. So there's home run list. I'm trying to think of the other guys. 660 definitely would have passed Mays. Right?
So he ended up at 630. So that, he ended up 7th. Pujols ended up passing him, getting to 703. A-Rod to 696, and then Willie at 660. So that he's 7th all time, and he's a what if. Like that's just crazy to think of. So that's my outfield, man.
Yeah, and just a note on Gwynn. Love Tony Gwynn. I'm waiting for an in-depth, me baseball book guy. I know our friend Barry Bloom has written a book about Gwynn, I believe with Gwynn. But I'm waiting on that one, the one biography on Gwynn.
Like
really good.
The 24, but for
something Gwynn. Like that. But yeah, legend of his time, legendary coach. And I was just watching 2 days ago the interview that he did with Bob Costas and Ted Williams, where they talked hitting. It was like 1995 or something, and it was amazing. Gwynn talked about how Gwynn was like a kid in a candy shop talking with Ted Williams about hitting and hitting the inner third, and the Ted Williams book of hitting, where like all the baseballs have the batting average numbers in them, and they were talking about that, and just really cool in-depth conversation. that nobody in today's game would understand. Anyhow, yeah, great outfield, and we got to put together a lineup at the end of this or something.
Yeah, I guess we could now. So maybe next week or next episode we can put our outfield and infield
Yeah,
together.
before the rotation.
Yep. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we got to do the dream coaching staff too. Ron
Right.
Wotus for
Ron
you.
Wotus. Woe's going to be my manager. He's finally going to get his due.
Oh, don't let Giants fans hear that. They're gonna want. Well, they already want. There he is. He's still hanging up back
Yep.
there.
Whoa, we got you, dude. Yeah, so that's my outfield, and it's always fun to just kind of think back to some of the guys we've been able to see play, and it was really cool. Just like last thought that I had pop in my head was, back, the Giants and Padres played each other 19, 20 games a year when I was a kid. And when I didn't have responsibilities aside from making sure my homework was done before the Giants game started, I got to watch Barry Bonds and Tony Gwynn play in one night so many times. It was really cool. So always cool to kind of look back. But now we got to look forward, Stephen. Like we said, it's September 8th as we record this. We got about 20, 25 games left in the season, and the playoff picture is coming into focus, except for the wild cards, I guess.
Yeah, the wild cards are wild, but yeah, I don't know if we need to take too much time on the division. We kind of already know that Minnesota looks like they're going to win it. Houston is interesting. Houston, because Seattle got really hot in the month of August. I think they had 20 something wins in the month of August, which is insane. And and it's crazy what they're doing. And Texas, I believe, is out of are they out of
They're out right now. They're a half game out. So
which, yeah,
shout out to say, hey, Rob, if the season ended today, Bruce Bochy is missing the playoffs.
that's insane with the amount of runs they scored. And they're 3-7 in their last 10 games. Toronto kind of bumped up, but that could change. That's an interesting race right there. As is the AL West. And then of course the other one that I look at is definitely the National League wild card race. And it's between like what 5 teams that are all vying for one spot. I know the Marlins had Alcantara and Jorge Soler hit the injured list, but they're kind of on the outside looking in with Cincinnati for that third spot. The Giants are now 3 games out. They took a tumble this last week, but Philadelphia definitely in. Cubs probably definitely in. It's definitely a battle for that third spot.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm assuming Philly's going to get in. They'd have to have an epic collapse, and with how they've been playing, I just don't see that happening. So I'm with you. I think Cubs are also. I mean, I think the Cubs have the best record since the trade deadline. I remember we did our trade deadline preview, and we're like, okay, who are they going to trade Stroman and Bellinger to? And then they had a little 6 or 7 game win streak, and they just haven't looked back since then. So yeah, we got the D-backs, Marlins, Reds, and Giants fading fast, but 3 or 4 teams looking for one spot there, and they're all bunched pretty close together. So it's going to be a lot of scoreboard watching. I was even at lunch earlier today. I was watching the Cubs and Diamondbacks playing each other, and I believe the Diamondbacks pulled that one out. So interesting times in the wild card races.
Yeah. And you know what we've been saying all year that now I look back and I'm like, God, it never happened. San Diego. Somebody's got to pay for what happened there. I don't know who it is, but somebody's got to go.
The payroll's paying for it. They're paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got the same record as Pittsburgh. The Mets, somebody's got to go. I mean, these are 2 disappointing teams, wildly disappointing teams. So that's an off-season topic for sure. But
yeah,
or maybe final, weekend after the World Series. That's where stuff always goes down when it comes to firings and stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think it was kind of telling that the Padres, one thing I guess in between episodes we never touched on it, but like all the guys getting waived,
yeah,
especially from the Angels, which I mean we could have a whole episode on that S show, but the Padres, they could have had all of those guys if they wanted to, and they didn't touch a single one of them. They kind of threw in the towel, raised the white flag, and said, we're out of it.
Yeah. White flag, that's a good way to put it. They conceded for sure. Few guys there are hurt now. Few guys didn't have great years. Speaking of downs, it's time for 3 up, 3 down. Insert sound effect. I don't know where that came from.
But yeah, we're finally doing it, Steve. And we've said like almost every episode, we end with 3 up, 3 down, and we end with
We're
the
gonna flip it.
downs. We're flipping it. We're still doing 3 up, 3 down, but we're starting with the downs so we can end on a high note.
Yeah, we're sick of ending with, oh yeah, it's unfortunate. Hope he could get back on track. We're gonna start with the downs. We'll get them out of the way. Let's start with the situation with Julio Urias with the Dodgers. His second time being arrested for domestic violence. Not a good thing. He's been placed on administrative leave by the Dodgers. He is not going to be seen the rest of the year. And the hope is that he's not seen the rest of time in a baseball uniform. Apparently, it's being investigated right now. It happened down there in Florida at that messy, what was it, a messy event? I don't know exactly what
Yeah, it
was
was a
going on down
soccer game.
there.
I think it was actually in LA.
Oh, it was in
Um,
LA.
but yeah, it was the Miami team that Messi's a part of. I don't know if you saw the lineup of like celebrities that came out to that game because it was in LA. But yeah, it was at that game, so it was like in public, reported by a bunch of people who saw it happen. And the dreaded, like you said, administrative leave. You never want to see that. And yeah, like you said, hopefully we won't see him in a baseball uniform.
Yeah, and Dodgers definitely have to take action there. Next one here is going to be Anthony Rendon. Anthony Rendon is, I guess for a long time he was kind of considered a guy that was, very soft spoken, good to the media. Well, for whatever happened, that's turned that's turned a little bit because he's kind of, he's had a history since he signed the contract in LA of not being great to the media. Apparently, a reporter tried to ask him about his injury, and he said, "No habla inglés," which means no English today. Or that's the context what he said, no English today. And it's a tired act. Talk to the media. Don't look like an idiot. Don't act like a fool. Don't act like a dick. Just
And
not
he's
a
done
good.
all of the above.
Yeah, this is. I mean, then the tweets came out. There's a compilation. Somebody put all of them together. I wish I had that tweet up of all the times Anthony Rendon has kind of given the press the middle finger. There's one that comes to my mind is somebody asked him how his wrist is, and he said, "Which one? I have two." Like, cut the sarcasm. Talk to the media. Be a professional. And you know what? You're signed all this money. I understand you're frustrated that you're not putting up numbers. You're frustrated that you're not playing a lot of the time because of injury, but at least have the common decency to answer questions. Just everybody's obligated to do it. And just because you're highly paid, frustrated guy doesn't mean you're exempt from it. So Anthony Rendon, as far as I'm concerned, you're in loser territory right now. And then finally, the umpiring has been atrocious. This season, I guess there's been moments where it's been bad, but recently it has been atrocious. There's been guys that are missing like multiple calls in
Like
recent
6 inches
weeks.
off the plate.
6 inches off the plate. There's compilations of that out there too. And again, I don't know how I keep going back and forth about robo umpires. I don't know where I am on that, but usually home plate umpires like they have the high 90s report card, but whatever reason is we've seen so many bad calls the last week or so, few weeks. It's bad. I understand the season's winding down. Guys have dinner reservations now. The sun's going down early. They want to get out, but unacceptable umpiring. They're not held accountable, so nothing happens to them ever, but not
Yeah,
a very good
and it's not.
time.
Yeah, it's not even just the balls and strikes too. Buckner threw out Kevin Cash the other. I don't know if you saw this one, Steven, but lost track of the pitch clock. Didn't reset it. The hitter they were playing. It was the Rays and the Guardians. Batter doesn't even get in the box until 2 seconds left. He calls a pitch clock violation on the pitcher. So Kevin Cash comes out and says, "What are you doing? The batter wasn't even in the box."
I
And
didn't see this.
he throws Kevin Cash out. I'll send you the replay of it. It was ridiculous. I mean, the batter stepped in, and then literally a second and a half later, he's calling a pitch clock violation on the pitcher, which should have told him mentally something was amiss here. Because if anything, and then it should have been on the hitter because they
Yeah.
have to be addressing the pitcher by 8 seconds left. But it was on him to begin with because he never reset the pitch clock.
And this is
And
after almost a full year of pitch clock stuff. Clean it up.
yeah,
Almost
and
a full
it's just
year.
it seems like it's the same guys all the time. There are a lot of good umpires and we don't know their names because we don't hear about them because they're doing their job. And that's the umpire's job. Fans don't come to watch you umpire a game. They don't watch the replays to see what you messed up. So there's a lot of good umpires. I don't want to make it sound like we're like all umpires are trash, but the ones that are bad give all umpires a bad name. It's your Angel Hernandez, missed calls after missed calls, Buckner, Laz Diaz has been Laz Diaz for the last, again, for the
Somebody
last few
ejected
weeks.
Rizzo last night, who's out for the year with an injury, and he was
Yeah.
barking on the dugout rail. Maybe it was warranted or not, but I don't
Hey, I
know.
mean, maybe that's the guys you put on the rail to chirp for you because they're not going to play anyway. So, hey, give this guy a piece of our mind so we don't lose a
Yeah,
player that we can put in the lineup.
we'll pay for your fine collectively.
But yeah, they're making it very hard to not justify at least taking a deeper look at robot umpires.
Yeah, and I understand like they're and everything they've tried in the minor leagues has come up to the big leagues, but this is taking a long time because I think they're trying to get it right. And I do appreciate
Yeah.
that to some extent, but I'm sure we'll hear the future of robot umpires. Not next year. We've heard that it's not coming into the league next year, but maybe in the coming years we'll see what happens and the ripple effect that might have on the umpires and their union. So I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
So those are my downs. Did you have any thoughts on the Rendon and Urias stuff?
Yeah. I
Or
mean,
I think you commented on the
Urias,
Urias.
yeah,
Yeah,
Urias, we don't, I mean, yeah.
Rendon,
Touched on that. Rendon, I mean, I'm sure he's been in Anaheim or LA, Anaheim of Los Angeles for
Orange
four,
County.
yeah, in Orange County near Disneyland for 4 years now. I'm sure he's probably frustrated with all the time he's missed. He's probably answered these questions over and over again. So I could see why he's probably being a little short with the media because he's probably answered the questions and there's nothing new. He's just perpetually injured at this point. But at some point, you got to just grin and bear it and answer some questions. And
Somebody
then,
asked him how he was feeling. Like they asked him how he was feeling, and he said, "No habla inglés." Really?
no, I get it. Yeah, I get it. And I get it, especially with you. I'm sure if you put yourself in, if you were covering the Angels, like you do for the Giants, you'd probably get really irked by it. So I especially see why you have him as a down, and I can see why that is frustrating.
Like a simple greeting. Hi,
Yeah,
Anthony. Or
just like feeling good. I'm improving and move along. No hablo
yeah.
inglés today.
You don't even have to
It's a
stop
weak
walking.
response.
You don't
Yeah,
even have to stop walking. You don't even have to like stand at your locker. It's not one of those things. You can just keep walking and say, getting better. But instead you chose to be, an asshole about it. So,
yeah. But hey, let's
downs.
finish on a high note.
Or yeah,
Let's
ups.
finish with our ups. So yeah, 3 ups. I'm gonna lead off with Giancarlo Stanton hitting home run number 400 of his career.
Congrats.
Also a guy who's missed some time, but could potentially approach 500 if he can have another few healthy years, especially playing at Yankee Stadium. And when I mean, I think 400 was a moonshot. It was a no doubter. It's always fun to see a healthy Giancarlo Stanton hitting home runs, and he hit number 400. And also, I do want to say, Volpe for the Yankees, he wore his. I think he took his one timeout before his at bat even started, just so that Stanton had time to take his curtain call and get the love from the crowd. So I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah, really cool. Congrats to Stanton. And he's looked hard to watch at times, in a Yankee uniform, especially this year where he's not running as fast. It looks like he's not healthy, but we forget that Stanton is one of the elite power hitters of his generation, and 400 home runs is definitely a testament. So, congrats to him. Big accomplishment for him.
Yeah. Up number 2, I'm going Trea Turner. He's been on fire lately. Part of the reason why the Phillies are looking pretty secure in a wild card spot right now. He had 7 home runs in 7 games. And then he also got sent on paternity leave 9 months to the day after he signed his $300 million deal with the Phillies. I'll let the audience do the math there on what might have happened to celebrate that contract. But it's a pretty cool time to be Trea Turner, hitting the cover off the ball and starting the family. So that's pretty awesome.
For us to find out about that, somebody had to look into it, and somebody had to, right? Does that ever go through your mind? Like somebody had to have found that
Yeah.
and was thinking about
Yeah.
it.
Kind of weird to be thinking about, but someone found it and it's a pretty funny little tidbit. But on top of that though, he has been just playing out of his mind again. It was kind of cool, kind of weird to see it in Philly, but a couple months ago when he was kind of scuffling, the crowd like made an effort to like cheer him on even when he was struggling, to kind of let him know that they're behind him, which is, usually Philly's one of those crowds where if you're playing bad, they're going to let you know that you're playing bad. And instead they kind of look to lift him up, and he has answered that beautifully for the Phillies fans.
Yeah, not what they did a few years ago with Alec Boehm when I don't know if you remember this, where he made a few errors at third base and then he was spotted on the camera saying, "I hate this place."
Yeah.
And then they cheered him coming up after. So,
Yeah.
city of
Yeah.
brotherly love.
Yeah. Maybe we're seeing how the turntables in Philly.
Some Turnerly love.
Oh, there we go. Look at you. So that Trea is up number 2, and then up number 3, Ronald Acuna Jr. Became the first ever 30-60 player in baseball history, and he did it, I believe, right as the calendar turned to September. So he has a whole month to build on that, which is just nuts. And I believe he got married the day that he did that. Correct?
Yeah, so I
The day
believe
that
his wife's visa or something with her citizenship was about to expire, and they had to kind of get married fast for that to change, and they did it before the game.
Yeah, they did it on the road. I believe it was in Los Angeles. He like called his agent a day or two before, I believe, and said like, I need to get married on this day, put it together. They didn't do a courthouse wedding. They got like a whole venue and like catering, and they did a legit wedding in a very short amount of time. And so pretty solid day. And it was really cool that, he did do it in Los Angeles because him and Freddie Freeman are really close from their time together in Atlanta, and he got to be a part of that. I think Freddie gave him something after the game. They did a little thing in the tunnels of Dodger Stadium to kind of commemorate the occasion.
And
And
it was a
so,
grand slam too.
yeah, against the Dodgers. So, all in for that. But he's one of those guys that's just really fun to watch. Hopefully people, if they didn't know that yet, are seeing that with just his combination of speed and power. He missed all of, I think it was last season with injury. So to see him bounce back and have such a historical season is really cool to watch. And we'll see where he ends up. 30-70, 40-60. Where will it go? We'll see.
Yeah,
But up number 3.
Yep, stolen bases back. Glad Acuna's taking advantage of it. He's really one of the bright players in the game. And just to reiterate about the marriage thing, this is what Mark Bowman wrote on MLB.com. He said, the ceremony was scheduled just days before Maria, who's his now wife, under terms of her Venezuelan visa, would have been required to leave the United States. Had that happened, she would not have been allowed to return to the U.S. for 3 months. And of course, 3 months is a big deal considering Acuna is going to be playing deep into October, we assume. So she would not have been able to see postseason. So good for Ronald.
Yeah, and I believe they have a couple kids too. So he would have been like without his whole family for the stretch run.
Yeah.
So, he'll have his family with him for that run. And for the first, she doesn't have to go anywhere now. So that's awesome. And so, yeah, as we record this right now, Acuna's at 34-63. So he could easily get to like 40-70.
That's wild.
He could be 40-40, and there's only been a few of those guys ever.
Canseco, who we got to get on here.
Right. We got to call Morgan, or I think he fired Morgan a few years ago, but yeah, those are the downs at 3 downs, 3 ups.
Yeah. And we shut it down again.
Look at us. 31 up, 31 down.
31 up, 31 down. That's not too, I get it confused with outs because it's like episode 27. We've gone through a complete game, but no innings. We're doing innings. So, a little more than what is it? 3 games. We're on our 4th game, I think.
Yep. We just finished the 4th inning of the 4th game.
Fun times. Good math. I can't do it. Everybody could go ahead and follow the podcast on Twitter at @shutdown_inning. Go check us out on Spotify, other places where you find your podcast. Go check us out. Thank you for listening. Playoff stuff coming up, postseason previews coming up, finishing out September coming up, all of it on the Shutdown inning. See you guys later.
That's what's up.